Shlamalochun anashimi ile seragawu arketa bet erke asherbanipal gushotasa mardutanaya aturaya. It is my privilege to participate in the Nabu Circle lecture series, which marks the beginning of many more insightful lectures to come. In the annals of ancient Assyria, the god Nabu was the lord of wisdom and revered as the patron deity of scribes and scholars, instilling within the heart of Assyrian civilization a profound veneration for knowledge and erudition. Under the benevolent gaze of illustrious rulers such as Ashurbanipal, a grand library arose in Nineveh, elevating the pursuit of scientific understanding to unprecedented heights. The Assyrian legacy of intellectual inquiry persisted, transcending epochs and weaving its way into the fabric of history as the Assyrians founded esteemed centers of learning, exemplified by the illustrious school of Nisibis, which propelled Islamic civilization into a golden age of enlightenment and progress. Enduring trials and tribulations, including the tumultuous First World War, the Assyrian people clung to their unquenchable thirst for knowledge, allowing their love of learning to go undiminished. In the embrace of this noble tradition, the Nabu Circle lectures, initiated by the Assyrian Cultural Foundation, now serve as a platform for distinguished scholars to congregate to impart their insights into the annals of Assyrian history, literature, language, and culture, preserving and perpetuating the brilliance of a civilization forever marked by its profound love for wisdom. Our speaker for today is Dr. Efrem Yildiz, who is a professor at the University of Salmanca, teaching philology, Hebrew, and Aramaic studies. Dr. Yildiz's topic for today's lecture is How Should Modern Assyrian Be Taught? Oh, and everyone, please, by the way, turn on your cameras. That would be great. Our lecturer for today, Dr. Yildiz, studied in several countries, including Germany, Italy, France, and Israel, obtaining a bachelor's degree in philosophy, 2 degrees in ecclesiastical and biblical studies, and a doctorate in biblical theology. He is skilled in classical languages such as Greek and Latin, and Semitic languages such as Hebrew and Aramaic. He also knows modern languages including Spanish, English, French, German, Italian, modern Assyrian-Aramaic, and Turkish. He is a full professor at the Faculty of Philology, specializing in Aramaic history, language, and literature. He has taught biblical and rabbinic literature, Old Testament institutions, and biblical Aramaic. He has participated in many national and international congresses and has given seminars and courses in his specialty in different countries such as Europe, the Middle East, Latin America, and the United States. He has also participated in teaching staff mobility programs at the University of Cambridge and the University of Bucharest. After the lecture, we invite you to stay updated on the latest news and events of the Assyrian Cultural Foundation by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. These lectures will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. I will provide you with the links to all our social media channels in the chat. I kindly request that you keep your microphones muted throughout the lecture to prevent any interruptions. Please note that failure to comply may result in being removed from the Zoom session. Now, I would like to hand it over to Mr. Robert DeKelaita, who has helped me organize these lectures. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome everyone to the Nabu series of lectures. I just want to say we have these lectures periodically. We're going to put at least 1 lecture per month, and we're very honored today to have Dr. Efrem Yildiz talk about how Assyrian should be taught, modern Assyrian, and he's going to go over the history of the language and the important institutions that uphold this language. And in addition to these lectures, we have something called the Assyrian Circle, where we will be speaking in the Assyrian language only. And our focus there in that series of lectures, which will be going on again once a month. So there will be 2 lectures per month through the Assyrian Cultural Foundation and the Ashurbanipal Library, One will be the Assyrian Circle, and one will be the Nabu Circle lectures. Nabu Circle lectures are devoted to academics and will be given in English. The Assyrian Circle lectures will be given in Assyrian, typically by an author of an Assyrian book on a variety of subjects, or the son or daughter of a person who wrote a book, and they will be sharing their experience in the Assyrian language. And it's meant to generate interest in the Assyrian language and generate interest in writing in Assyrian, Lishana Sūrāyā or Al-Turāyā. So with that, we are very honored, and I will give the floor to Dr. Efrem Yildiz, please.
Au trabara vestima, au tanrabara vestima Sara au Robert, l'adi persa ed mahkuch al shanen derba an qaitalet by Shmil ba DeKelaita. So after this, a few words, I'm honored and I'm thankful to you for giving me this occasion to talk about a topic which is very important for today's Assyrian society around the world, how the Assyrian language should be taught. Do you hear me well? Good. Before talking about the main topic, I would love to, as highlighted by Robert, I would like to make a kind of resume upon the historical development of the so-called Aramaic language and why it's called Aramaic and not in other way and so on. Well, as you know, this, the so-called Semitic languages that were structured, especially from the 19th century onward, there are three clearly defined linguistic family trees, which are called Northeastern language or family of language, which is Akkadian, and then Assyrian and Babylonian. And there is the second one, which is Northwest, which is called, which is divided into two important branches, which is Aramaic and Canaan, from which then there's an evolution from which have been originated Hebrew, Phoenician, Moabite, and Edomite, and so on. And there is a third Semitic linguistic family, which is Southwest, which is Arabic and Ethiopian language. So this is just as a short division, which is much more complex if we get deeper in it. Now, as you see, there are two languages that are directly linked to the Assyrian society or to the Assyrian history from the beginning of, let's say, of the 8th century, but especially even I would dare to say in the 9th century, when the Assyrian Empire started getting larger. And after the occupation of the current Syria, many Assyrian small states came under the Assyrian control. And what happened at that time, there were clearly several Aramaic dialects. There was not a common mean of communication between the different states, but after the deportation of several people from the Aramean origin, from Syria and from the south, I mean even from the border of Lebanon until the southeast of Turkey, there were several people taken from their original homeland to several Assyrian cities, and Ashur was one of them. And many other peoples were moved then to Syria, from Israel to Ashur to Babel, and so on. So there was a kind of a strategy where the people were really getting in touch with each other. And the Aramaic language, for the first time, when I'm using these terms because they are usually used by the scholars. The Imperial Aramaic, where does it come from? Who gave this name to such a period? Because when the Western world became acquainted was the Eastern world, Mesopotamia and Middle East, many new languages that somehow were buried or died, as we are used to say, were rediscovered. So they created a structure in order to divide these languages according to their links to different linguistic families. And Aramaic language, as imperial mean, was started clearly, and today we have more than enough sources that show that those who really invented this second, let's say, language, which has then become gradually an international means of communication between the Assyrian imperial society, was created by the Assyrians themselves. So the simple fact that we call it Aramaic is only a question of how this language is connected to the ancient dialects, the structure, the verb system, the morphology, so on. But I would dare to say that this language could be also called Assyrian Imperial Aramaic. It was because it was really created at that period. We see that from this policy of deportation, we have 2 centuries where we see that the people from this region or from the Aramean origin were integrated totally in the Assyrian society. Those Arameans that were taken from Kwe, Patina, Hamat, Damaschia, Geshur, and so on, were after 200 years totally assimilated, and they used the Assyrian, let's say, cultural practices, liturgies, and so on. They thought as Assyrians. They were totally integrated in the Assyrian society strata. They were employed by the Assyrian administrative system as well. So today, saying that because there's an Aramaic language, there's an Aramean origin, is totally wrong. I would say that this Imperial Aramaic, which is called in this way, I would say it's an Imperial Assyrian Aramaic, and we will see how close this links are between the Assyrian Imperial language and then the second Assyrian Imperial language, which is Aramaic. Sargon II was totally bilingual, and he sometimes complains why a letter was written not in the official language, because at that period we see that several technical words are sent to those communities that are under the Assyrian control or power or administrative system. They start writing in somehow in Aramaic. Why in Aramaic? This is my personal opinion. I think it's a question of being practical. If you compare the Assyrian language, which is written with the cuneiform script that needs at least 610, 613 syllables in order to write correctly, in comparison with 22 letters, everybody would try to change to a system that then has given the occasion to develop this language in a place which is not its original place, where it became a reality as a language. So let's just see that the Aramaic language was the second language of the Assyrian society at the beginning, and then it has become then when the Persians, under the Khurish, the king Cyrus, Elamites, Medes, Babylonians, and so on, when they won the war against the Assyrians, they kept two important things: administrative system and the language, because it was still well settled. So there was no need to shift to another language. This was, in my opinion, one of the main reasons why the Imperial, the so-called Imperial Aramaic was kept even during the Persian or the Achaemenid period. What influences does have the Aramaic language from the Assyrian? We know today there's a huge amount of words that were taken from the Assyrian language, because when the Aramaic language became the option to become an imperial language, there were many technical words that were taken as loanwords from the imperial language itself. This is, for example, we see not hundreds, there are even probably thousands of words that date back to the Assyrian origin. The Aramaic language, in its beginning, we do have only two tenses: Zawna da'bar, Zawna da'tid, accomplished and yet not accomplished action. The presence, for example, Zawna qa'im, is clearly taken from the Assyrian language. So this connection between the two languages is in a natural process of a society that lives together, a society that looks also for the simplification of the communication mean in this case. So this is, in my opinion, one of the main reasons why the language, the Aramaic language, which for me is an Assyrian Imperial Aramaic, became the second language after 200 years of living together. But then during the period when the Greeks came and invaded the whole Middle East, there we see a clear intention of the Greeks to transmit also their language and their culture. And this has given a new situation. In the 4th century BC, they started creating isles. For example, in Antioch, Greek was really strong. But from Antioch to Orhai, to Edessa, there is not a big distance. The Aramaic or the Assyrian Aramaic were clearly the main language in that region. So we have, in order to talk about these different languages, when we say East and West Aramaic languages, Madanhaya, Ma'arwaya, and so on, these classifications are really just in order to somehow update the reader about where these languages were developed. When we talk about then the periods, we do have an ancient Aramaic, we do have an imperial, I would say Assyrian Aramaic, and then we have a middle period where this kind of separations took place, and that have given also to a new era where this Imperial Aramaic was then developed in different places, in isolated places. This is why we talk about the Palmyrene Aramaic, the Mandine Aramaic, then afterwards Nabatean, Syriac, Surît, and so on, because the Greek was competing with the Aramaic. This separation endured, or this process of having two main languages in the Middle East endured until the arrival of the Arabs. With the Arabic, the situation changed totally. We know that until the 14th century, the biggest literary production of our language, which we call this classical Syriac, starts from the 3rd until the 14th century. where we have also this kind of, again, borrowing and buying, giving and receiving, because the language or languages are a mean which shows how a society or the different societies get in touch with each other. And then the borrowing processes, the so-called loan words from the Arabic and from the Surît or the Aramaic, are a natural process. Let's now just, in order to tell you, calling these languages this and that is somehow a scholar issue, that has been a scholar issue at the beginning in order to classify, to structure the languages. But somehow when we come to this period, there's a huge confusion. The people who have become acquainted with the Middle East, with Mesopotamia especially, their knowledge was based on the biblical texts and also on the ecclesiastical history. Why we speak about Syriac, Syrian, so on in the modern languages? Because when they started rediscovering the Middle East, there was a structure still given by the religious part, which was called the so-called Syriac or Syrian churches today. The Church of the East is called the Eastern Syrian Church, due to this information that was transferred to the Western world. And the scholars at the beginning were dependent in somehow on what was transmitted until then. When the archaeology discovered many other languages, then the structure became or has become a bit more complex. But several parts have not had the chance to develop as, in my opinion, they deserve, especially the modern part. Today we call the modern Assyrian language Syriac or Neo-Aramaic and so on. But it's again a kind of denomination that has been given from outside. We were a bit, in my opinion, we were a bit lazy in this field. And thanks to the Western scholars, we have learned much more about our legacy as a whole, cultural, historical, linguistic legacy. But at the same time, we haven't learned to defend our language, our linguistic heritage or legacy as it deserves. We still depend on these denominations, where, in my opinion, justice hasn't achieved the real point where we should be today. I don't know why the modern Assyrian language can't be called as it is, even among the scholars. We call it, we divide it first of all in two branches, Western and Eastern. Perfect. We know the historical reasons. But then calling it Neo-Aramaic or Sūrāyā or this and that, in my opinion, doesn't reflect the historical true reality of this people. This is why in the last period I insist very much on two terms which we will cultivate for the next years: Surît, Sūrāyā. And Surît, Sūrāyā, both they reflect two important issues. Surît and Sūrāyā are Assyrian. Whether West and East, for instance, that's not a question. I'm not going to enter in this point. But as you know, we have today sources that go back to the BC era, where we see that Sur and Ashur are synonymous. No problem of calling my own language Surît. which then can be translated into English, German, or whatever language we are dealing with as Assyrian. So there are two important points why we haven't been able to show to the international society our linguistic identity as well. In my opinion, it's also a point that must be touched, not here, but I'm going to mention it. The point is, when we have been converted to Christianity, we have given much more importance to our religious identity than our national one. At that point, as you know, we counted only on three small kingdoms, Sūrāyā, Hatra, and Ashur, which were from the Assyrian origins, and where Assyrian Aramaic, or Aramaic as it is, was spoken between themselves without any problem, or in a natural way. But when we changed from our ancient faith to the new faith, several elements were clearly, intentionally avoided in order to focus on the new era. Okay, so this is why we have been called with many other names, but not with the real one. We were the church of the Persian church, the Syrian church, this and that church is the fruit of this point where we weren't somehow officially recognized as a territory where we could have developed this path, but we depended on our spiritual leaders who have given much more importance to their faith than to their national identity. It's a normal process. It's not a critic, okay? But just in order to let you know, where does all this confusion come from? And where the Western scholars have done a huge effort, but they haven't been able to go to see the whole legacy as a whole, and not just focusing on what they received from our religious leaders. Today we have the chance to add this part, because whether we want or not, we are Assyrians. Now I'm going to make a jump to the modern language that I have been mentioning. We have our own language divided into two main dialects due to the historical discussions and so on. We know about them. But I have a big concern in relation. I'm going to see him. Robert, please, you tell me when I have to stop, okay? Or Sarah. We are facing now a period which is, in my opinion, very important. We are in a period where or we decide to cultivate our language, or we will lose any chance of cultivating it, maintaining it, and using it as a mean that has been used for millenniums, not only for centuries. Our language, in my opinion, hasn't had the chance, and it's a miracle that it survived until today. If we take in account all the historical circumstances, persecutions, massacres, and so on, it's a miracle that today we are able to still talk about modern Assyrian Aramaic. So, but now there is a huge problem, and this is my concern, that the biggest part of Assyrians live abroad, live in diaspora. And if we don't have a kind of strategy, a kind of methodology, and a system where our language, our culture, our history is taught as it deserves, then we really are undergoing a huge danger. Our language is now classified under endangered languages because of the number. So where should we focus on? What should we do in order to keep our beloved language alive and also to develop it? Before giving an answer to this question, I would like to focus on where the language was cultivated at the beginning. And we have to distinguish two important issues. One thing is the learning, the systematic learning of the language according to a grammar book and this and that. And other issue is to transmit it in a natural way, starting from the main point, which is the family. If we go back a bit in past tense, we see clearly that due to the circumstances that I have mentioned, massacres, persecutions, and no chance of creating a center where we could develop this language. Due to these facts, the church was one of the places where the language was cultivated. But somehow the church focused on the Syriac, on the classical part, and didn't give importance to the modern one. And thanks to the daily life, and thanks to somehow isolated villages and somehow small cities that have a cultivated language, today we can have the chance to say that our language is still alive. One of this, as I told you, this is why we have to distinguish the three main, let's say, parts: religious centers, family, and educational center. Today must focus in an intelligent and practical way to transmit the language. Why I'm talking in this way? I have been in the last, at least last 20 years, focusing on this project in order to find the way to transmit our language in an effective way. As I told you, in the religious, let's say in the churches, in the parishes, in the dioceses, and so on, there is a small effort, but which should be reinforced, because much more importance is given to the classical part. Now we see, especially in diaspora, in Australia, I don't know how I was amazed about seeing small kids learning our language at school in a natural way. This is what we have to focus on. So we have to sum these forces in order to teach our language as it deserves. In the church, it's clearly, I mean, also the priests should learn better their language. And this not, I hope, not offending any of our priests or bishops, but honestly, they should learn the language in order to transmit it well. Family, in my opinion, is the core of this project. If we don't start since they come to the world, our kids, when they are 15, 16, 20 years old, it's a bit late, in my opinion, because they don't grow up in a natural way with the language. I'm telling you things that I have been applying to myself. There is no Assyrian community in Salamanca at all. But my kids, they speak Assyrian in a natural way, even between themselves. So just we have to find the way how to do it in the family. Especially for those who live in diaspora. And here I realized a long time ago a complex that Assyrian have. We have immigrated, or what we were focusing on, that our kids speak perfect English, French, German, where they live. And then we would say, yeah, our Surît will come afterwards, or Sūrāyā will come. No, this is a totally wrong way of transmitting your heritage. And this complex has created this kind of shifting to the main language. I mean, I'm conscious of a fact that the language, the main language is the one you are living daily with. If you are in Spain, whether you want or not, you go to the school and you learn Spanish, but you have to teach at home. Not only teach, to live the language at home. What I did, especially, and this was my main concern, how to transmit to my kids my mother tongue in a natural way. Indeed, I introduced a third language at home in order to create these two linguistic registers. Their main language, Spanish, and their second main language is Assyrian. Why? Because when I'm with them, my wife is not Assyrian, she is now Assyrian, but she is not from the Assyrian origin. But we created this system where our kids talk in a natural way between themselves, and this is the point, in Assyrian, not in Spanish. Why? Because from the beginning, we started applying this method. What the Assyrian society lacks is a method to apply for the daily life. This is very important, otherwise forget it. And I'm going to make you a confession. When I started teaching from the beginning, I was focused to do it in a systematic way, but then I realized that other points were important: symbols, history. I created a fantasy of history of upon the Assyrian society to my kids in order to have a positive image of what their forebears were. So we should not just tell them, which is good, to know praying the Aun Bishmaya, but also you have to tell them how the palace of Qala or Babylon was built, and giving them, just transporting them through the images to those places where they can also feel proud of it. Because don't forget, we are a minority, and you live in a society that doesn't have any knowledge upon your culture. If you don't give them or provide them with this symbols, at the end the language becomes a kind of, well, there's no attractive issue on it. And this is very important. The family, in this case, must take it absolutely as a definitive and decided project, transmitting the language according to the 21st century methods. We have those methods. We can do it. If just a single family has achieved this, in a community is easier. Just we have to make them much more conscious of speaking, talking when they are together among each other, not in English, not in French, nor in German, but in modern Assyrian. If we do that, then it will gradually become a kind of chain. You know, if you are just in a group which uses such a method, then the people will become much more conscious of the richness of their legacy, the richness of their language, the richness of their culture as a whole. So family is totally important for such a first step. Then, you know, if I make a kind of view upon the teaching of the modern Assyrian language in the educational centers, there we have failed. America has failed. Europe has failed. Australia somehow has failed because we haven't been able enough to invest in the higher educational centers to teach our language, to teach our modern history, and so on. But it's also normal because we are experiencing a kind of a century history in diaspora. So this needs at least 2 centuries in order to settle the basis as it deserves. But if we don't focus on it, then we will be lost. In the Middle East, in Mesopotamia, in Assyria, there was always a society that distinguished you from the others. This was becoming conscious of your own being a group which is differentiated from the Muslims. In the Western world, there's no chance. You don't need this process in order to cultivate your own identity, which in the Middle East was mainly religious, but it kept our being a different people from them. And also it helped our language somehow surviving. But be conscious of a fact: if we don't cultivate our language and invest in it for the next 20, 30 years, then all the efforts that our forebears have been doing, all what our forebears have been suffering in order to keep alive this beautiful language, there's no chance to keep it alive. In a globalized world, there's no chance if we don't focus and invest in this way. So all and every Assyrian or convinced Assyrian should take it very seriously and really apply such processes to, if they don't have the chance to invest. Probably the University of Salamanca is one of the universities in the world where the modern Assyrian language is taught as obligatory course a whole year. We teach. I'm now going to tell you what we do in order to give you an idea how we could work on developing new methods and so on. And this is not a project of few years. Since 1997, 1998, I have been focusing on such issues since I had the chance to teach at the university. So we have today a whole degree where 3 years of language, ancient, late, and modern Assyrian is taught. And in a natural way, and we are receiving people from outside. There are 2 years of literary texts. There are 2 years of literature. I mean, directly linked to the Assyrian legacy. This is what we have to imagine. If we do that, imagine I'm giving just example as the base is in Chicago. If Chicago University is a huge university, but we should have a whole department focused not on the only on the ancient Assyrian language and so on, but also on the modern one. This is what we have to do. Education centers must be encouraged to do so. Otherwise, there's no chance. Because the way we teach in the church or in the family is important, but it's not sufficient enough. Our teachers today, not all of them, but big part of them, they don't have a whole vision of the Assyrian language from the ancient period until now. Even in the modern one, because many people think that the Assyrian language is a kind, just it has been transmitted orally. Now we are doing Ph.D. works for the first time, totally in Assyria. I have a Ph.D. student from northern Assyria who is now doing a whole dissertation in Assyrian language. Probably it's the first time after so many centuries. So this is what we have to work on. What are we doing now at the University of Salamanca, besides the degree that is an official degree where everybody can learn the Assyrian language in different with the Hebrew language and so on? We have also afterwards, I saw the necessity of creating a specific branch at the university for the Assyrian language, history, and culture. And this is why we have created the Nineveh Academic Chair. which is going to celebrate its second Congress from the 11th to 13th of September, where you all are invited to see what kind of scholars are participating in it, what topics we are dealing with, language, history and culture, literature, and so on. This year, we will talk also about the identity issues, because we need to have clear what the Assyrian identity is. There are so many denominations, Chaldean, Aramean, Syrian, and so on. But there must be, how would I say, an umbrella name, which is only Assyrian. And the Nineveh Academic Chair is working on such projects. We have 3 main fields that will be developed mainly by the Assyrian scholars, by the way, and who are experts in language, in history, and literature. We are, and I'm just telling, I have been talking with Robert a long time ago about the possibilities of creating a budget for scholarships for Assyrian talent in order to be trained in their language, history, and literature. This is what we have to do. This we have to focus on. And Assyrian language is a beautiful language. Let's work on it. There is a huge work to do, but we should learn an important point: to work in a collective way. The technical term I use for when I talk in Assyrian is si'tanaid, collectively, and this is what we are trying to do within or through the Nineveh Academic Chair, where the scholars from the United States, from Europe, from Australia, from ATLA, and so on, will work together to publish, first of all, an Assyrian history, 2 volumes, seen and understood by Assyrians themselves. What is a shame for us, and I'm part of this being a shame, is that until today, we don't have an Assyrian official history that the Western world should know. We learn from them who we are, what language we have. I'm thankful to the Western world, but now it's time also that the Assyrian society, the Assyrian intellectual sector, a group, must provide the Western world with an Assyrian history given by Assyrians. And this will be done by the creation of the Assyrian Academic Council, which will be linked also to the Nineveh Academic Chair.